In a world where we are constantly connected, we ironically seem more isolated than ever before. Social media has drastically changed the way we communicate, work, and live. But while these platforms allow us to connect with people across the globe in an instant, the question arises, what is this constant connectivity doing to our mental health? This documentary explores the profound effects of social media on our mental well-being, based on scientific studies and personal stories. The rise of social media and mental health. Social media began as a way to bring people closer together. Platforms like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter grew explosively and transformed the way we communicate. However, as the use of these platforms increased, psychologists and sociologists began to worry about the potential downsides. Dr. Jean Twenge, a professor of psychology at San Diego State University, is one of the leading researchers in this field. Her study, published in 2017 in the Journal of Abnormal Psychology, analyzed data from over 1 million teenagers and found a link between social media use and an increased risk of depression and suicidal thoughts among young people.
I think the online world has followed an interesting trajectory, when it comes to attention seeking and narcissism and so on. So teen depression has doubled, and that was true even before the pandemic. The rise started about 2011 or 2012, right as social media moved from optional to mandatory, and right when smartphones were owned by the majority of people. Loneliness went up, anxiety went up, and it's not just symptoms. Self-harm behaviors, so the CDC keeps track of this, emergency room visits for self-harm. So that's an objectively measured behavior, not something subject to any kind of self-report bias. And self-harm among 10 to 14-year-old girls has quadrupled in the last 12 years.
Twenge argues that the rise of smartphones and social media has significantly impacted the mental health of the youngest generation, with constant comparison to others being a major factor in their decline. The addictive nature of social media is no accident. Platforms are designed to keep users engaged as long as possible, often leading to compulsive use.
Bottle, right?
Dr. Simon Sinek, a well-known motivational speaker and author, describes how social media triggers the same dopamine release as gambling or drug use. This explains why many users struggle to control their time on these platforms. A groundbreaking study conducted by Dr. Andrew Przybylski from the University of Oxford in 2018, published in Nature Human Behavior, showed that it's not the time spent on social media, but how it's used, that determines the impact on well-being.
We have age restrictions on alcohol, we have age restrictions on smoking, and we have age restrictions on gambling. We have no age restrictions on this other dopamine-producing device called social media or cell phones. It's the equivalent of throwing open the liquor cabinet and telling our young adolescents, I know this is a stressful time, try the vodka, it'll get you through these hard times. That's basically what we're doing. And so what's happening...
He found that passive scrolling through social media, observing others' lives without interacting, has more negative effects than active participation, such as posting or engaging with friends.
It's becoming hardwired, where our young generation isn't learning the coping skills and coping mechanisms to turn to another human being when they're struggling or stressed. They're turning to social media or their cell phones. Their self-worth sometimes becomes wrapped up in how many likes they get. Now, we also know that dopamine is released with cell phones and social media. So that bing, buzz, flash, and beep that we get from our phones that feels so good, it releases dopamine.
Imagine you're scrolling through social media and you get a notification, a new like on your latest post. That small rush of excitement you feel, that's dopamine at work. But what exactly is dopamine? And how does it play a role in something as seemingly harmless as social media use? Dopamine is a chemical in our brain that acts as a messenger between nerve cells. It's often referred to as the feel-good neurotransmitter, but it's more accurate to say that dopamine is involved in motivation and the reinforcement of behavior. When you do something pleasurable, like receiving a compliment or enjoying a delicious meal, your brain releases dopamine. This release signals to your brain that this is something worth doing again. Now, when it comes to social media, platforms like Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok are designed to tap directly into this dopamine-driven reward system. But how does this work in our brains?
The brain controls thought, memory, emotion, along with all the five senses and every process that regulates our body. All those tasks are performed by pathways, where the brain sends messages to the nervous system, and the nervous system sends messages back. We'll focus on the brain's reward system. Here is where dopamine is mostly produced, a type of neurotransmitter also called a feel-good hormone. That is sent to four pathways. One of those is the mesolimbic dopamine pathway, which is connected to the amygdala and the hippocampus. The first processes emotion, while the latter is essential for learning and memory. Too much or too little dopamine affects how we learn, get motivated, our mood, attention, our heart rate, and many other behaviors and physical functions.
Over time, your brain starts associating social media with this reward, making you want to come back for more. One of the reasons social media can be so addictive is because of something called variable rewards. Unlike a game where you know exactly when you'll get your next point or prize, social media keeps you guessing. Sometimes you get a lot of likes, sometimes you don't. This unpredictability keeps you hooked because your brain is constantly searching for that next dopamine hit. It's the same principle that makes gambling addictive. As you spend more time on social media, your brain might start to develop a tolerance to the dopamine it's receiving. What used to give you a thrill, like getting a handful of likes, no longer feels as satisfying. So you might find yourself spending more and more time online, chasing that feeling. This is where dependency can start to form. You might begin to feel that you need social media to feel good, or to escape boredom or negative emotions. But here's the tricky part. Even as social media use starts to interfere with your sleep, productivity, or relationships, the pull to keep scrolling remains strong. That's because your brain has been trained to associate social media with rewards, thanks to the dopamine release it triggers. In summary, dopamine is the key player in why social media can be so hard to put down. Understanding how this chemical works in our brains can help us be more mindful of our habits. Cyberbullying and social media cyberbullying is another dark aspect of social media. For many young people, online harassment is a real and painful experience that often goes unnoticed by adults. Dr. Dan Olvus, a leading expert on bullying, has shown that cyberbullying can have severe consequences, including increased anxiety, depression, and even suicidal thoughts. Social media often presents a distorted view of reality. Users typically only post the highlights of their lives, creating an unrealistic image that others feel compelled to match. This can lead to feelings of inadequacy and depression, especially among young people. The University of Pennsylvania, published in the Journal of Social and Clinical Psychology, examined the effect of limiting social media use on the well-being of students. Hunt found that restricting use to 30 minutes a day led to significant reductions in feelings of loneliness and depression. She concluded that spending less time on social media and more time on direct interactions with people can have a positive impact on mental health. As the negative effects of social media on mental health become increasingly clear, so too does the focus on potential solutions. Experts like Dr. Cal Newport, author of Digital Minimalism, advocate for a conscious and limited approach to digital technology. He suggests that we should only use social media in ways that benefit our well-being and spend more time on offline activities that bring true satisfaction. In a world where social media has become an integral part of our lives, it is essential to be aware of the impact these platforms can have on our mental health. While social media offers us unprecedented opportunities to communicate and share, we must also acknowledge the risks and develop strategies to protect our well-being. By being mindful of how we use social media and striving for a healthy balance between online and offline life, we can mitigate the negative effects and move towards a healthier digital era.